Well, it's another day and another hit piece, and my red eye burns with rage as Kotaku puts out this new layout of stink piece that we saw BuzzFeed News do with their hit piece that we discussed before. They all basically work together. Remember that Kotaku, the AV Club, Deadspin, Gizmodo, Jezebel, all these companies are related, so you can know that they're probably all on the same page. We have basically an outright attack on Riot Games and League of Legends. Now, I know this has probably been covered, but I suspect I'll have an interesting take. I hope that I'll have an interesting take. And I had probably about 100 people email me this article and ask me to cover it. So I work for all of you. So sorry I'm late, boss, but here it is. We had this article come out just a few days ago, basically. Inside the culture of sexism at Riot Games. Now, of course, we've heard this terminology before. It is a way to exacerbate, to overinflate isolated incidents. We've heard this with the college cultures and all sorts of stuff like that. So this came out Tuesday by Cecilia DN, who's not going to work here anymore. Nainanaja. Di Anastasio. Now, this is a long shit piece, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's irrelevant. We start by, if you don't know who makes League of Legends, it's Riot Games. And they have a strict hiring policy around hiring only gamers. Now, that is, I would assume they're right. They have a right to hire the correct employees. They even have policies in place that if you're hired and you're not a culture fit, that you can receive a severance for up to 10% of your salary. You have Lacey made it her mission to hire a woman in a leadership role. Gee, I wonder why. Lacey had heard plenty of excuses for why her female job candidates weren't Riot material. Some were, quote, ladder climbers. Others were, quote, too much ego. Most weren't gamer enough, and a few were, quote, too punchy or didn't challenge convention. It sounds like she keeps really mediocre company to me. There's a common thread with a lot of these perpetual victims or social justice types, and it's always everybody else's fault. You know, it's not perhaps them. It's not even possible. Amada, you can find Riot's company's manifesto recruiting materials. A quote. Across the board, you'd have side-by-side similar backgrounds, said Lacey, which is not her real name. But leadership team would constantly ixnay any female candidate for leadership. Now, this is an opinion. This is not, there's no evidence provided for this. This is just one clearly disgruntled ex-employee's opinion. Meanwhile, hundreds of women continue to work at Riot and don't support this story. Hiring a woman into a leadership position proved impossible for Lacey, she said, and she left the company because of sexism. Now, maybe she experienced it. Like I said, and like I try to set the example, if you experience something illegal, you report it to the police so that assholes like me can't make fun of you on the internet, okay? If you experience this sort of thing, you should have litigated. Now there's no evidence, and now I don't have to believe you. She said that her direct manager would ask her if it was hard working at Riot, being so cute. Oh no, not a compliment. Compliments are literally rape. You know this. Sometimes she said he'd implied that her position was a direct result of her appearance. Every few months, she said her male boss of hers would comment in public meetings about how her kids and husband must really miss her at work. What's wrong with that? It sounds like this guy was a nice guy. Now, maybe what she should have done is let him know privately that that kind of stuff made her feel uncomfortable. Or, again, filed some sort of suit with HR, but we don't see any evidence of that. One day, Lacey conducted an experiment. I'll take things that didn't happen for $500, Alex. An idea she really believed in fell flat during a meeting. She asked a male colleague to present the same idea in the same group a couple of days later. He was skeptical, but she insisted he give it a shot. Lo and behold, the week after that, he just went in, presented exactly as I did, and the whole room was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. His face turned beet red, and he had tears in his eyes. They just don't respect women. I'll take things that never happened. This is like your typical woke 8-year-old story. That's what this is, right? Where's this guy to publicly back up that story, right? All we have is, now if this guy was so woke, such a respecter of women, he should be out there in public confirming the story. Although, of course, we don't see that. Who cares? This is some history around it, how much money they are. Over the course of several months, Kotaku has spoken to 28 current and former Riot employees, many of whom came forward with stories that echo Lacey's. Though some of those employees spoke on record, most spoke anonymously because they feared for their future careers in the game industry or were concerned that League of Legends' passionate fanbase would retaliate against them for speaking out. Many of those sources painted a picture of Riot as a place... Now, by the way, we're talking about 20 disgruntled employees out of thousands. Thousands. Now, if you work in a major corporation, you're going to piss off 5 or 10 employees a year. If you've been around for 5 years, you've got 100 people with an axe to grind, okay? I just want to be realistic about this. Now, again, if they had experienced these things, they should have filed a suit, or they should have spoken to HR, or they should have something documented. And of course, we have a 5,000-word shit piece with no evidence at all. 5 months after we started reporting for this article, days after Riot apparently learned about it, 5 months after we started reporting for this article, days after Riot apparently learned about it. They don't know that. That's an assumption, by the way. The company added a diversity and inclusion page to the website that says, we aggressively enforce a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination, harassment, and general toxicity. It's incredibly important to our leaders to embody this commitment and reinforce the expectation across the teams. The page was added in late May, according to the Wayback Machine, but when asked, Riot representatives said the company's roadmap for diversity and inclusion initiatives included public-facing definition of gamer, which was presented to Riot staff as early as April. Notably, well before Kotaku began inquiries. Kotaku began in December of last year and reached out to Riot leadership in mid-May. So that whole paragraph is trying to say, wow, they wouldn't have done this on their own. All of our hard work must still be worth it. All of our hard work still matters, even though it's been debunked. The page also says there is no cookie-cutter template for what a Rioter looks like. But women who have worked there said that there's nothing could be further from the truth. Now, we're talking about 3 or 4 women out of thousands of employees. Again, keep that in perspective. Over the course of reporting the story, we found many former Riot employees that were restricted from talking on the record because of non-disparagement agreements. Again, so then you can't quote them. They don't exist, all right? For those of you out there with trying to take a reasonable approach to this, you cannot let this slander slide. If you couldn't quote them on record, you don't get to put words in their mouth. That's not how reporting works, but of course, we're on Kotaku. Some say they received severance after speaking to Riot's quote talent team that the company calls its human resources team about an experience of the company. The bros before hoes thing is so ingrained, even when they claim to be a meritocracy. Okay. Here again is a purposely misrepresented definition. Everybody knows bros before hoes is universal for men and women, and it means friends before like love interests. It doesn't mean promote your friends. It means like, hey, value your friendships. It doesn't have anything to do with a work environment, but of course they had to have a spicy quote. When contacted by Kotaku for comment on the details of the story, Riot sent over a lengthy statement, which we've quoted throughout the story. Yeah, quote mind, you mean. In short, okay, so Kotaku's interpretation, the company said that the anecdotes described in the article are explicitly opposite to its culture. When we encounter any contrary behaviors, we dig into it, understand, evaluate, and address. The company said, we have a zero-tolerance policy, blah, 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 blah. Among the people we spoke to, 3 women, 3 whole women, 3 people. This is definitely a culture. Now, a company that certainly has many hundreds of females working for it, we've got 3. So as you see it throughout the article, the spin, we talked to many, literally millions of every single woman in America. Describe being groomed for promotions and doing their jobs above their title and pay grade. Hello, welcome to working for a fucking gaming company. By the way, welcome to any real job, by the way. Every single job, everybody out there always works above their pay grade. 1, that's just the way the world works. 2, that's how you get promotions. Doing the bare minimum is not how you get ahead in the world. And somehow they spun that into this sexist narrative. That's interesting. Both male and female sources have described seeing unsolicited and unwelcome pictures of male genitalia from bosses or colleagues. Again, show me the receipts. By the way, if that happens, they should have reported it. That is not okay. I mean, I don't even understand why people don't report stuff. It's like they want to get famous over handling the situation. You don't get sympathy if you don't do the bare minimum to report on it and do your due diligence. I don't feel bad for you for getting a dick pic, quitting, and then running to Kotaku. I don't feel bad for you. Sorry. In fact, I don't even believe you. One woman saw an email thread about what it would be like to penetrate her. Interesting. Where's the email thread? You could simply forward that email. Happens all the time. Just forward it to a personal account. How hard would that be? One former male employee said that Riot's bro culture is more pronounced behind closed doors, and it hurts men too. One of Riot's male senior leaders regularly grabbed his genitals, this source said. Maybe he had like jock itch or something. If he walked into a meeting with no women in it, he'd just fart on someone's face. Okay, maybe that happened once ever. And 2, Jesus Christ, lighten up. That's how I got this eye. No, just kidding. That's not how I got this eye. But Jesus Christ, could you be reaching more? The bro culture there is so real that one female source said she'd left the company due to sexism. It's agonizingly real. It's like working in a giant fraternity. Another anonymous person to help spin this narrative, by the way. And let me tell you something, anonymous woman who left due to sexism, you have a huge settlement waiting for you if you choose to prosecute this and you can prove it. Why wouldn't you do that? If you felt like you could prove it, or if it really happened, why aren't you in court? Why are you sharing stories with Kotaku? 80% of Riot employees are men, according to Riot data collected from employees' driver's license. But what do they identify as? It's not unusual for a tech or gaming company to struggle with sexism and lack of diversity. In recent studies, some have tried to reckon with the reality, taking steps to hire more women and making games that showcase more diverse characters. But Riot, the fundamental values fueling its celebrated culture of quote core gamers, and Riot's devotees over the past decade may also be the root cause for ingrained sexism that manifests in both blatant and subtle ways. Okay, so let me translate that. More men are fans of playing games like League of Legends and competitive sports, competitive esports, and thus more men apply to work for a company that promotes that. That's not sexism. That's self-selection. We have no numbers on the number of women that apply. We just don't know these things. Yet Kotaku, in their great reporting, is going out of their way to fill in the blanks for us. So I'm thankful for that. That's the notion that the most talented and deserving employees will rise through the ranks into leadership positions. In theory, it's a no-brainer goal for any workplace. In reality, it doesn't seem to materialize that way at companies like Riot. Oh, by the way, God, I just refute every sentence of this. That's how it works at literally every company, in my experience. It's not who you know, it's who you blow. And that's the way the world turns. That is just the way it works. You have to work on relationships inside of companies to get promoted. There's almost no instance inside of corporate America, regardless of your sex, where just pure meritocracy exists. So don't even try this bullshit where you spin it into some sexist thing. This is a the way the world works statement, not a sexism statement. God. One report surveying 3,700 women don't care. In books like Lean Out, women in tech detail how the cards are stacked against them from the moment they walk through these companies' glass doors. They don't fit the image of an ideal employee at a tech company. Most of the pictures I see of the men that work at these companies look very similar to women anyway. I'm sure they'd fit right in. Stories from both men and women who have worked for Riot indicate that the company behind League of Legends also suffers from this trend. Where are their statements? You can't just keep saying, okay, let's do a thought exercise for you, genius journalist at Kotaku. I have 6 or 7 anonymous sources that say you are openly sexist against men. Now, I can't share them with you, and I'm not going to share literally a shred of evidence because I don't have to. I'm making this video, and I'm here to say that several anonymous people have come forward to say that you're a rabid sexist against men. How do you like it? In her interview in 2015, one woman was asked to recall her favorite trinket from 2004 World of Warcraft raid. She had already detailed what games she played and how often she played them through our hour-long interview. She said her interview had been fact-checking her, looking for holes in her story. So what? It sounds like they do that to everybody. You have no evidence that they don't ask men these exact same questions. God, this article is trash. I was trying to prove to this executive that I wasn't lying about playing games. To demonstrate she was real Riot-style gamer, she recalls wondering in desperation, should I ask the guy to log into my World of Warcraft profile? Eventually, she was hired. Okay, so she was hired anyway. Despite hearing from a confidant later that her interviewer didn't think she had the grit to work there. Well, clearly she didn't because she quit, and now she's spilling the beans about how bad it was. Another confidant told her that the tone of her interview would have never happened if she were a man. Again, hearsay. Literally no evidence of any of this. This is probably the worst shit piece I've ever read. According to 4 sources, not quoted here, with knowledge of Riot's recruiting process, the ideal Rioter image has led to the company to turn down a disproportionate amount of women for jobs. No evidence provided. How big is your e-peen? During hiring, Riot vets whether potential employees will be culture fits. That's any corporation does that. According to 3 sources, not quoted here, obviously, familiar with Riot's recruiting practices, Riot focuses on finding what company calls core gamers who can empathize with League players. This sounds like a good practice to me. And especially with the grind for competitive skill points on paper, that makes sense. Okay, great. Full stop. People who work at Riot need to understand the product that they're putting out and that the community they're meant to serve. But in practice, 4 sources, not quoted here, say the company preferencing core gamers when it hires is not just for game devs, but it's all full-time employees, from office managers to finance specialists. This means a certain kind of person. No, I 100% support this type of hiring. Your culture is the most important thing at a big company like this. It's just as important at a small, but you often see it really identified and promoted at big companies. So what if you want that same culture to extend to the C-level of your employees? That just sounds like good business to me. Those sources said that talented women have fallen through the gaps of Riot's hiring process because they weren't considered core gamers. That's their opinion, no evidence. One source described it as an excuse. God, can you give, could one of your sources come forward? Could anybody come forward? People are taking this article as absolute fact. And there's literally no evidence at all. None. None. Riot says it doesn't define core gamers as a MOBA and first-person shooters players, with several sources with knowledge of Riot's recruitment practice and who have been interviewed for positions as Riot dispute, in their opinion, by the way. One former Riot employee who presented as a woman, for example, had always played RPGs and said that during her 2014 phone interview for a position at Riot, not all adjacent to game development, the interviewer asked if she had played real games like Call of Duty, they were called. So, that's his opinion, and she can't prove that she was either A, hired, or B, not hired over her answer to that question. That's his opinion. It's a company. It's called at will employment. A company doesn't have to hire you if they don't want to, and they can fire you if they want to. Now, if they fire you without cause, there is this thing called the legal system, which most rational people not looking for victim bucks and e-fame would take. But apparently none of these people sued the company. So either a lawyer told them they had no real case, they're lying, or I shouldn't feel bad for them because they won't even be their own advocate. If someone you just met, how would they know you're a gamer? I said, well, I'm looking at my TV right now that has 16 game consoles plugged into it. Are there even 16 that exist? So I would be like, okay, name them. I've never seen these sorts of phrases applied to male hires. Again, a former employee told she asked how big her e-peen was by an interviewer who was questioning her over gaming habits. Okay. We know enough. Now, I'm not going to even subject you to the rest of this BS. I'll archive this and you can read it later if you want. It is absolutely absurd that an outlet could publish an article like this directly with its direct intent to smear the reputation of Riot Games and League of Legends. That is the only purpose of this article. If this article's purpose was to make any real change, they would have included literally any evidence. They didn't care. They wrote thousands of words about nothing. It's fiction. Until they prove otherwise, this article comes off as slanderous, in my opinion. And until companies like Riot start standing up and litigating against this, however unlikely their win, places like Kotaku and Polygon will continue to write fan fiction about faux sexism with anonymous sources. This is not journalism. This is barely yellow journalism. This is fiction. And Kotaku should be ashamed of themselves.